I was 8 years old. Just a little boy. I remember waking up in the house by myself. The place was so empty. And I remember the cocoa that was already cold but left there on the table for me to drink. And although it was cold, I was so grateful for it. And then I got dressed, got ready for school. And then I prepared to take that very, very long walk to the bus stop. I guess it's not that long, except when you're 8 years old. It seems very long, especially for that time in my life. It seemed very, very long. When I got to the bus stop, I waited, and once the bus got there, I stepped into the school bus and I sat down. Now you may be thinking, well, that's not that bad. You just took a walk to the school bus. You know, yeah, you're 8 years old. That's part of life. But the thing is, what made that day a little different was I was walking to the bus stop and getting on the school bus alone. You see, before that, I would always take the bus, and I would always take that walk with my sister. You see, my sister was 7 years old when we lost her. It was a epithelioid sarcoma, a very rare, fast-acting cancer. So rare, in fact, that even when I was in medical school, it was never even brought up. I had to search it out myself, and even then there was not much information on it. The reason is because it was so fast-moving that the patients, when diagnosed, were gone in just a few months. So tests, studies, impossible to do in such a short amount of time. You know, I really loved my sister. At home, it was always Lisa and myself that would play. When we went to school, it was Lisa and myself that went to school. It was Lisa and I against the world until it wasn't anymore. It was just me. And being 8 years old, not knowing what depression was, not knowing what grief was, I became so alone. I was so lonely. You know, I look at that 8-year-old kid that was myself, and I think, I just can't help but think the amount of loneliness that little guy must have felt. If I were to describe it, it was like this invisible weight put on these 8-year-old shoulders. The world was very, very heavy on those 8-year-old shoulders. What I was dealing with was loneliness. If you look at loneliness as just a single topic, everyone feels lonely from time to time. As if it's something that just passes here today and gone tomorrow. Much like the sun shows up sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. But loneliness is so much more than that. And studies are now showing that we have to take this thing very seriously. Especially at these times, I know everyone's staying at home and you're isolated. It's one thing to point out that during times of war, the first thing that is done to a prisoner of war is to isolate them. What does that do? It's like putting someone on timeout. If you think about this, you can put your kid on timeout in 5 minutes and it's torturous to the kid. How is this something so difficult for a grown adult to deal with? I mean, what does that do to our minds? We understand now that that's actually a form of torture. To be separated, isolated, being somewhere that nobody talks to for long periods of time. As human beings, we were made to be social, to talk to one another, to care for each other. You know, yesterday my wife and I, we went to downtown Seattle. It was interesting because everybody's staying home. And there were a few people on the streets, but for the most part, not nearly as many people as I am used to. But it just made me think of how isolated we may all feel, especially during these times. And so for us to be kind of separate from each other at this point is very difficult for us. Loneliness is not just actually physically being alone. You can be lonely amongst a group of individuals. You can be lonely being with your partner. So what is loneliness really? It's basically a state in which you feel disconnect from everyone else. You feel as if you cannot connect with another human being. And with today's situation, it's easy to aggravate such a state of mind. Well, studies are now showing that loneliness, this feeling that you are disconnected from everyone else, actually decreases longevity, makes cancer grow faster. It advances Alzheimer's, weakens your immune system, making you susceptible to many illnesses. They found out that the detrimental effects of it to your body are worse than obesity and just as bad as smoking 1 pack of cigarettes a day. It can lead to anxiety, depression, hallucinatory delirium, and even schizophrenia. A meta-analysis that was done in 2018 that included over 77,000 participants, it showed a harmful effect for all-cause mortality. Let's look at that phrase real quick. What does it mean, all-cause mortality? It's a term that's used for statistical purposes in studies. It's basically all the way that a person can die. Loneliness is so severe that when you add it to either someone that has diabetes, that has heart issues, or any type of cancer, anything at all, it increases their chances of dying. So if you're feeling lonely today, talk to somebody. Call someone up, get on that Zoom app, and say something. We have to be there for one another in these times of isolation. And so going back to my story of how I was going through such hard times, there's a positive thing to that story. The positive thing is, although it made me think about how lonely I was and how alone I was in the world, it made me ask some tough questions too. It made me aware of my mortality and that life was limited. I didn't have forever. I didn't know what death was until that point when I lost my sister. But once I knew what it was, I had to ask myself the tough questions. If my life has an expiration, what am I gonna do with it? What am I gonna do with the few years I do have on this world? Big questions for a little boy.
And it's interesting because I do believe that emotions are there to teach us a lesson, and perhaps that was a lesson I needed to learn. And as difficult as those times were, it really helped me to value the time I do have left and appreciate the people in my life that really do matter.
So maybe for somebody that's listening to this, if you're feeling lonely, reach out to somebody, talk to somebody, do something on social media, but just understand you're not alone. You're not alone in your loneliness. This is Dr. R. Thanks for watching. Join us for our next talk where we're going to talk about some of the symptoms of loneliness and go into that a little deeper, and also what we can do further to decrease our loneliness. This is Dr. R, and this is worth saying.